Thank you very much for having me today. Thank you, Vice President McClellan and Dean Foley also for, I'm sure, mentioning the excellent work that the College of Education and Human Services does. And what I'd like to talk to you about today with respect to research is some of the steps that we're taking to improve the STEM education capacity and workforce within the state and also beyond throughout the rest of the country. But first off, I think everybody in this room is really well aware that there's a lot of loud calls for improving STEM education. But first off, what does that mean? Does it mean that the students who graduate from college are going to be able to say more Latin names for plants that they see outside? Are they going to be able to know more derivatives or solve calculus problems a few seconds faster? No, really what we're talking about here with STEM education and this idea that we're integrating these different components together is that we're going to want to prepare students to engage with and do these sorts of cross-cutting practices, cross-cutting skills that make STEM so powerful and productive both intellectually and economically for the society as a whole. So one of those cross-cutting skills that is getting increasingly important right now that affects all aspects of STEM is knowing how to work with data. So what we need is the next generation of workers, of entrepreneurs, of public servants to be literate with data. We need a data literacy. So just like being literate with text means that you can express yourself with a new bit of text that you've created, or that you can comprehend some bit of text that somebody else has created and make some sort of decisions off of that. Well, that's the same idea here with data literacy, is that we need our students, we need our workers to be able to express themselves with new data. We need them to be able to comprehend the data that others are presenting to them. And when we say this, it means not just being good with numbers, but being good with lots of numbers, being able to talk about large collections of numbers and seeing what are the tendencies and what are the trends that are in there. And that's a skill that my research group has been focusing on as well. And this is a national imperative. Don't take my word for it. These three magazines, I promise, did not collude to have the same magazine cover. I'm sure the media specialists can all agree, oops, we all have the same magazine topic. But I think this speaks to the fact that data is becoming ubiquitous. It's becoming a big part of our personal and professional landscapes to the point where we're having whole new professional fields emerge in training programs such as in data science. And so this idea of data literacy is becoming more and more pressing, and one of the ways in which USU can innovate is looking at ways to develop and foster that. But right now, despite very noble and hard efforts from a lot of very hardworking teachers and educators throughout the country, the current approaches for teaching data within STEM areas are not working. They are insufficient. Right now, the education system as it is focusing way too much on procedures. So how do you take a few numbers and compute something so you get a result at the end, but they're not focusing on the deep understandings that we need that would foster literacy with data. So that means students can calculate the average of a set of numbers, but they can't explain what that means in terms of the rest of the numbers that they had derived those from. And they don't know how to use those to make really good informed decisions, to make those data-driven decisions that are becoming a big piece of the workforce right now. And the research on this has been showing this has been a major problem for quite some time. And why is this? Well, part of it has to do with the kinds of curriculum that we're using. So what kinds of problems are we asking kids to be solving in classrooms? What kinds of materials are they being exposed to? And part of the fact has to do with, and the researchers here can all attest to this, it's hard to work with data. Collecting data takes a lot of time and a lot of energy. It's messy and it's complicated. And also it requires very specific tools, very specific instruments that you need in order to collect measurements out in the field. Well, what I am looking at right now is that I think we have a very powerful opportunity to do better within the educational system. We're currently at the tip of an iceberg where we're having this whole new breed of new technologies that, interestingly, we can wear. But the advantage of wearing them is that they produce data about us as we're going about our daily lives. So they are generating data for us behind the scenes as we go about our activities. They tell us how far we walked today. They talk us about how fast our hearts were beating, how many calories we burned, how we slept, etc. And if you've been around kids, then you know that they definitely move around a lot, and on school mornings they probably sleep too much. But now they can see it for themselves because the technologies and devices are there to report that. And so one of the key challenges that my team at Utah State University is figuring out how can we harness this? How can we have kids using some of these technologies and getting large amounts of data in a really short amount of time that is personally relevant to them? Something that they can bootstrap their own understandings from. And also, how can we make this work within classrooms in the way, in partnerships with teachers, design new curriculum, new tools, and entirely new models of instruction that have the potential to scale to other classrooms and other schools, regardless of location, and get the results that we want to get a data literacy. So let me tell you a little bit about what this actually ends up looking like. Now, our goal here within the College of Education is not to just get a bunch of devices and then drop them off at the door of a classroom and say, good luck, let us know how it goes later. What we're doing instead is with our research, we're focusing on how can we transform the classroom experience. And these devices are one of the ways in which we can start that conversation. So that means that when we bring these in and students are collecting their own data, that we are having classroom discussions where students are talking about their data and how they're interpreting their data and where they see trends in there. And so that way the students are becoming one another's teachers in there, and they're actually becoming a way of fostering a community of knowledge building and learning. So they might talk about, oh, my recess looked a lot higher than my PE, but I know PE was our big running day, and that starts to spur a very interesting conversation in there. It means also that individual students are getting very involved in conceptualizing their own projects they want to explore. This is one of my favorite examples. This student, who was a 5th grader, decided to do a head-to-head test of Fitbit trackers with an iPhone tracking app and collected several days worth of data, took all of her free time with it, and produced these data displays where she ended up concluding that the Fitbits were a more accurate choice in that situation. And one of the great things is I talked with her mother recently, and she had told me that this particular student, this was the most memorable experience of her school year that year, and she has now decided, and this is brand new, that she wants to go to Intech, the STEM charter high school because of this. She is very excited about science, and that excites me as well. Another thing we had is that in one project, we had a class of students where they noticed when they were looking at the heart rates of all the kids in the class, some of the older kids seemed to have a little bit of a different heart rate than the younger kids, and they wondered, well, does this carry on throughout the rest of your life? So then they went around the school and recruited teachers from all over, of all different ages, created their own experiments. So the kids were doing real science here, conducting their own experiment, and produced this data with 6 different teachers of different ages to see that you can see that here with the age down here and heart rate up here, that the resting heart rate for an adult tends to increase over time. And that was a very cool discovery, one that they didn't necessarily expect, but made for a very cool presentation in the end. So another thing that also comes out of this too is that they're seeing some of the messiness of data. There's no obvious single dot that makes the middle here, but they see that the numbers are messy. They see that you have to collect a lot of it, and that exposure, that's the kind of thing that we need to start bringing into classrooms more. We need to make this complex but doable. Now here is another particular project, and this is very USU relevant. In one 5th grade class, when they're having one of those engaged discussions, they started talking about how they get to school. And one of the kids really likes to walk up and down this little hill on the way into the school building. And they said, you know, the hill is about the same on both sides. Do I take more steps walking up the hill or down the hill? And so they discussed this and they figured, how could we test this? Oh, where would we find a hill where we could test this? Well, at USU, we know we have a wonderful hill, Old Main Hill. So the class all went out and they went, and this is them going up and down Old Main Hill, back and forth using Fitbit activity trackers and collecting data on how many steps it took with the same starting and ending points on there, just comparing the uphill and downhill part of it. And what they ended up producing here is uphill step data, downhill step data, more steps going this way. And what's very cool here is if you're a scientist, you see some of these standard normal looking distributions. You see that there are some outliers that the kids discussed and realized that is part of the data that you collect. But they also said, you know, overall, the tendency is that when you're going uphill, you take 140 steps, whereas going downhill, you take about 128 steps. So you do seem to take more steps going uphill. And what was cool is that they went from having an idea and a question to producing and making their own data, using the resources that are available to them, and coming up with a conclusion and then translating that, trying to figure out why is it that you would take fewer steps going down? oh, well, your legs kind of go further and you're falling as you're going down there, and they're reenacting that. That's the sort of deep understanding that data can do. That's the sort of deep understanding that I imagine that the next generation of schools can do if we bring in the right tools and the right supports to do that. So, as you've seen just from these few examples, what's happening in the classrooms, what are these kids doing? They're not doing worksheets and procedures. They're not reading out of a textbook. They're doing real projects. They're collecting real data with real technologies that are now accessible, and we're getting to see more and more of them with opportunities for how they could be used in the classroom. And as researchers, one of the things that we had done is conducted some experiments to compare using the exact same amount of time. So we had 2 fifth grade classrooms going in parallel and tested them at the beginning and the end of one classroom doing their traditional unit that they would normally do to cover data-related content, and another using the materials that we designed with the technologies we brought in. Traditional instruction, we saw a gain. We're happy about that. But what we're very happy about was with this wearables-based unit that we brought in and having kids engaging in their own scientific investigations, much greater jump that we're seeing out of that. So as a researcher, that's really encouraging. I feel like we are finding a way to get in there and get something deeper. But the numbers are one thing. For me, I spend a lot of time working with the kids and talking with the kids. And I want to play you this brief clip. Some of his understandings, because we don't always take the test scores just at face value. We'll give them some interview questions and throw a few different problems just to see how robust their understanding is, or if they just have memorized the right procedures that happen to fit on the right test. Well, as soon as we're done, we're starting to wrap up. We're saying, oh, okay, was there anything else that you wanted to say? How, anything about this experience? And this particular student had this to offer.
Just kind of be, I don't know how to do this. Why am I doing this? This is so hard. And you're done with it. You've gotten all and you feel proud of yourself, and you're like, I know how to do this now. This is like, I've learned so much just by making this data.
Now, this is not the only student I hear these sorts of responses from. It's an exciting thing for me, and to me as a researcher, this is music to my ears, but also, I'm a parent of 2 small children, and we go through the same decisions of trying to decide, which school do we want them to go to, and what other sorts of resources. But when I hear kids responding like this, and that I know that my colleagues in the College of Education and myself and my research team are able to make some of these things happen, I feel really optimistic, and I feel very proud of what we're accomplishing here through the research work, especially in the College of Education and Human Services. The reputation that Utah State University has with respect to innovating in education research has been able to help us attract and maintain a number of excellent partners, and we're especially fortunate because we're one of the few universities in the country that has a laboratory school. And the core idea with a laboratory school is that that's a space for new innovations, new curriculum, new models of teaching, training, and technology to get brought in and tried out and tested fully, because oftentimes this can be a real challenge with other schools that have a lot of other issues that they have to confront first and foremost. What is very cool, though, is that the laboratory school is still quite representative of the population within this area. So last time I spoke with the principal, I think it was about 30-something% free and reduced lunch, which is representative of this particular area. And you get a good mix of students from all different backgrounds and experiences.
So tell me what you would say to the students when you walk in and you try to explain to them what you want them to do. You place wristbands on each of them, or do they get to choose how they want to participate?
That's a terrific question. So one of the things that we oftentimes do is we start with what students are familiar with, and they're seeing a lot of new wristbands and wearable devices. You're hearing Apple and this rumored iWatch that we expect to come any day now. And so some of the students already have some familiarity with that, and they're intrigued. But oftentimes this is something that we're really focusing on, and it's being marketed as something for personal health and personal behavior change and for adults. And we haven't really explored what's the opportunity here with youth. Now, what are some of the concerns that are with youth? Some of it is, how much do I walk to school each day? But some of it is, how can I use this as a way to learn different things within school? Or what sorts of games at recess are going to really make me sweat? Those are some of the different issues that I think that a lot of the companies have not even begun to broach the topic of, but we have a chance to talk with the kids and find things that they personally care about and that they can use and leverage because there's so many of them within a school. So there's actually a really ripe space for them to design their own kinds of experiments, whereas one motivated individual who's just tracking their own sleep is going to need to spend a good 6 months to get any meaningful detail. We have 30 students who are all collecting data together. That's looking a lot more like the kinds of science that we're hoping to have scientists do in real labs.
So did they each get their own wristbands?
Yes, one of the things that we look at, and I know there's been a lot of talk lately about this notion of one-to-one, and there's been recent things within the state legislature talking about that. One idea here is it's important that they all have access to some of these devices, and that way they can find ways to discover new opportunities with them. But we do provide a one-to-one and look at some of the opportunities that brings up. You can have different groups working on different projects in parallel, and it's a very exciting opportunity for them to each have something new that they can use and that they can call their own throughout the year.
Yeah, they probably thought it was pretty cool.
A lot of them were very boastful with their parents about it, and there was some sort of sibling rivalries that had come about. But that's actually how some of the projects come about. It's like, oh, well, you happen to have an iPod, and your iPod supposedly can do some of these things, but let me see what my wristband can do. And that actually lets them start asking, well, is the iPod track as well as this? Another thing is that it's kind of a badge of honor for them to walk around campus and have some of this cool device on their body, because they know they're doing something neat and special, and they're part of something that's bigger that could have a larger impact beyond just their classroom. But if I could add one thing with that, one of the other aspects of the work that I do is that I oftentimes, some of the most exciting innovations we can look to within education emerge within other spaces. So for example, there's this this movement which is called the Quantified Self movement, which involves a lot of hobbyist trackers, largely in major metropolitan areas, who have helped to spearhead a lot of the sort of wearable technology movement and to start showing different self-experiments that they've conducted. One aspect of that has become doing your own DNA sequencing or getting your own microbiome profile. And so there are companies that do that. I do think that there are important caveats, just like what Abby had said. But for example, 23andMe was a company that did DNA sequencing. I think there were some recent legal concerns that were raised on that. And again, the information that one gets back from that service should take with a grain of salt and discuss with an expert, and also consult the scientific literature. But there's also uBiome, which is a biome service, microbiome service that you can send, I think, one of your own fecal samples to.